15 years of working 60-hour weeks in the corporate world had finally paid off. I stood on the ridge overlooking my new ranch property, watching the golden sun cast long shadows across acres of open pasture. The land stretched before me like a painting, rolling hills framing the horizon, the modest farmhouse and large red barn sitting proudly in the valley below. This was not just property. This was freedom. This was peace. This was everything I had saved for, sacrificed for, dreamed of during countless late nights hunched over spreadsheets in my downtown apartment. The real estate agent had described it as 40 acres of prime agricultural land, but words could not capture what I felt looking at it. The previous owners had maintained it beautifully for 30 years before deciding to retire to Arizona. The pastures were divided by sturdy fencing. The barn was solid, if in need of fresh paint. The farmhouse was simple but charming, with a wide porch perfect for watching sunsets. I spent the first week just walking the property, learning its contours, its special places. The creek that ran along the eastern boundary provided natural water for the livestock I planned to raise. The southern field had the best grass, thick and lush, even in the height of summer. The western ridge offered protection from winter winds. It was perfect in every way I could imagine. My first major purchase was Ferdinand, a magnificent black Angus bull with a gentle temperament and impressive bloodlines. He would be the cornerstone of the small herd I planned to build over time. I also added a dozen chickens, 2 goats, and a pair of horses that needed rescuing from a neglectful situation 2 counties over. Every morning I woke with purpose, the work physical but rewarding in ways my corporate job never had been. The folder of paperwork from the closing had mentioned something about a homeowners association, but it seemed like a formality in such a rural area. The documents described it as loosely formed, primarily concerned with preventing true eyesores that might affect property values. The annual dues were minimal, the restrictions seemingly reasonable and largely focused on the more developed properties at the eastern edge of the association boundaries. Most of my neighbors were welcoming. The Johnsons to the north brought over a homemade apple pie and offered the use of their tractor if I needed it. The elderly Ramirez couple who owned the small orchard down the road invited me to their weekly barbecues. Even Mr. Peterson, a gruff but fair-minded cattle rancher whose property backed up to mine, stopped by to offer advice on my fencing. But then there was the woman at the eastern edge of the community. I noticed her one afternoon while mending a section of fence. She stood at the property line where her immaculately landscaped 5 acres met the county road, binoculars raised, intently studying my barn. When I waved, she did not wave back. Instead, she made a note in a small book before turning and walking back to her large Tudor-style house with its perfect gardens and precision-trimmed hedges. I did not know it then, but that silent observation was the first sign of the storm that would soon threaten the peace of my hard-earned paradise. A paradise I would soon have to fight to preserve. The package arrived exactly 3 weeks after I moved in. The delivery driver struggled under the weight of the thick binder as he handed it to me, making a joke about whether I had ordered concrete by mail. I thanked him and carried the unexpected delivery to my kitchen table, where it landed with a heavy thud that made my coffee mug rattle. The cover read, Whispering Pines Rural Community Association, complete bylaws, regulations, and compliance guidelines. 300 pages of microscopic text lay within, detailing restrictions on everything imaginable. The simple overview I had received during the property purchase had mentioned basic guidelines about junk cars and derelict structures. This document was something else entirely. I spent the entire evening reading through the binder, my initial disbelief turning gradually to concern. According to these regulations, my red barn violated the approved color palette for outbuildings, which apparently required muted earth tones rather than traditional barn red. My pasture fencing exceeded the maximum height restriction by 8 inches. Even the location of my mailbox was apparently non-compliant, positioned 4 feet closer to the road than regulations allowed. Most troubling were the livestock restrictions. The document stated that approval was required for any animals beyond household pets, with specific limitations on livestock numbers based on acreage. None of this had been mentioned by my real estate agent, who had specifically highlighted the property as perfect for the small cattle operation I had described to her. The final page of the package contained a notice of the monthly association meeting, scheduled for the following evening at the community hall 20 miles from my property. I made plans to attend, hoping to clarify what appeared to be significant misunderstandings about the nature of my property and its intended use. The community hall turned out to be a modern building with manicured grounds, located in the most developed section of the sprawling association territory. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a raised table where 5 board members sat reviewing papers. I recognized one of them immediately. The woman with the binoculars sat center stage, her silver-streaked blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon, her posture rigidly upright. "Welcome, everyone. Let us call this meeting to order," she announced as the last attendees found seats. "For our new members, I am Karen Mitchell, president of the Whispering Pines Rural Community Association, a position I have been honored to hold for 15 consecutive years." The meeting progressed with military precision as Karen led the board through agenda items, her voice maintaining a tone of practiced pleasantness that never quite reached her eyes. When they reached the item labeled New Member Property Reviews, she looked directly at me for the first time. "We have a new owner at the old Henderson place," she announced, consulting her notes. "I have conducted an initial compliance review and found numerous violations that require immediate attention." The room fell silent as she proceeded to list every issue I had read about in the binder, plus several more I had not discovered in my evening review. When she finished, one of the other board members, a balding man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. "Karen, the Henderson place has always been agricultural. Did not they have exemptions for most of these regulations?" Karen smiled tightly. The Hendersons did indeed have special exemptions based on the historical use of the property and their founding member status in the association. However, those exemptions were specific to the Henderson family and expired with the property sale. Our new neighbor will need to bring the property into full compliance. After the meeting, I approached the board table, introducing myself properly and expressing my concerns about the regulations as they applied to my working ranch. "I understand this must be overwhelming for a newcomer," Karen said, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. "But rules are rules. We have standards that maintain our property values and community aesthetic." She handed me a stack of formal violation notices, each one detailing required corrections and associated deadlines. "The red barn is particularly problematic, so garish, and those fence heights simply will not do for proper country living." As I drove home that night, the violation notices sitting on the passenger seat beside me, I could not shake the feeling that Karen Mitchell had decided long before meeting me that my vision for my property did not fit her idea of what Whispering Pines should be. What I did not yet understand was how far she would go to impose that vision on my little piece of paradise. The violation notices began arriving with alarming frequency, sometimes daily, each one more trivial than the last. The mailbox color needed to be changed from black to forest green. The garden tool shed located behind the barn needed to be moved 3 feet to the east to comply with setback requirements. The height of native grasses in the far corner of the property exceeded the maximum allowed natural growth before being classified as unsightly vegetation. I attempted compliance with the simpler requests. I repainted the mailbox. I rearranged the garden shed. I spent a full day cutting back prairie grasses that had existed there since long before any homeowners association. But for every violation I addressed, 2 more appeared. It began to feel less like legitimate regulation enforcement and more like targeted harassment. One Tuesday morning, while leading Ferdinand to a fresh pasture, I spotted a familiar luxury SUV parked at the edge of my property along the county road. Karen Mitchell sat in the driver's seat, a camera with a telephoto lens pointed directly at my house. When she saw me watching, she did not even attempt to hide her surveillance. Instead, she deliberately took several more photos before driving away. That evening, as the sunset painted the western sky in brilliant orange and pink, I sat on my porch enjoying a rare moment of tranquility. The peace was shattered by an unfamiliar sound. A persistent mechanical buzzing grew louder, and then I saw it. A drone, sleek and modern, equipped with what appeared to be a high-definition camera, hovering approximately 30 feet above the pasture where Ferdinand grazed. The bull noticed it immediately. His ears flicked forward, his massive head rising to track the unfamiliar object. The drone descended lower, its camera clearly focused on my prize animal. Ferdinand backed away, unusual behavior for such a typically calm creature. The drone followed his movement, maintaining its invasive presence until Ferdinand finally trotted to the far side of the pasture, seeking escape from the mechanical intruder. Only then did the aircraft rise and depart in the direction of the eastern properties. Ferdinand remained agitated well into the night, refusing his evening feed and packing the fence line. I had never seen such behavior from him before. As I checked on him one last time before bed, I made a mental note to speak with Karen about the drone flight. There had to be limits to this surveillance obsession. The opportunity came the very next morning. Her silver SUV was parked at our shared boundary marker, her clipboard already filled with notes as she examined my property through binoculars. I approached along the fence line, determined to have a civil but firm conversation. "Good morning, Karen. I would like to talk about the drone that flew over my property yesterday evening." She lowered the binoculars, her expression revealing not even a hint of embarrassment at being confronted. "Good morning. Yes, that was my surveillance drone, state-of-the-art. The association invested in it last year for more efficient compliance monitoring." "Your drone upset my bull," I said, working to keep my voice level. "He was quite distressed and refused to eat last night." Karen consulted her clipboard. "Speaking of your bull, his water trough is visible from the road, which violates Section 47.3 of the Aesthetic Guidelines. Farm implements and animal care items must be concealed from public view." She made another note before continuing. "As for the drone, as HOA president, comprehensive monitoring is necessary, especially for properties with ongoing compliance issues." Is there not a question of privacy or property rights? That drone was flying directly over my private property. "The HOA bylaws grant the board visual inspection rights," she replied with practiced patience. "Modern technology simply makes those inspections more thorough. Community standards must be maintained." That night, after yet another drone appearance sent my chickens into a panic, I began researching property rights and airspace regulations. My kitchen table disappeared under printed legal documents, FAA guidelines, and state privacy laws. The single lamp illuminated my impromptu legal education, as I searched for some way to protect my property and my animals from this increasingly invasive scrutiny. In the distance, the now familiar buzz of Karen's drone provided unwelcome background noise to my research. What became increasingly clear as I worked into the night was that this conflict had moved beyond simple neighborhood disagreement. Karen Mitchell was not just enforcing rules. She was asserting dominance, establishing control, and she was willing to use every tool at her disposal to make my dream property conform to her vision, regardless of the stress it caused to me or my animals. As the drone made another pass over my barn, I realized this situation would get worse before it got better. The drone became my constant shadow. From sunrise to sunset, the mechanical eye followed my every movement around the property. What had begun as occasional flyovers evolved into daily surveillance missions of increasing duration and boldness. No longer content to hover at a respectful distance, the aircraft now descended close enough that I could clearly see the high-definition camera rotating to track my activities. Morning chores became performances for an unwanted audience. Feeding the chickens, mucking stalls, repairing fences, all conducted under constant observation. Even simple moments of rest on my porch were interrupted by the drone positioning itself just beyond the property line, its camera focused on me as I attempted to enjoy a cup of coffee. The effects on my animals grew increasingly concerning. The chickens stopped laying regularly, huddling in their coop when the familiar buzz approached. The horses grew skittish, requiring extra time to calm them before riding. But Ferdinand suffered most visibly. My once docile bull, known for his gentle temperament, developed nervous behaviors I had never observed before. At the sound of the drone, Ferdinand would now pace anxiously along the fence line. He began losing weight despite having access to abundant pasture. His magnificent coat lost its healthy shine. Some mornings, I would find evidence that he had spent the night walking continuous circles in his pen rather than resting, deep tracks worn into the soil from his repetitive movement. On a trip into town for supplies, I encountered Bill Henderson, whose family had sold me the property. We chatted briefly about my settling in, and I mentioned the escalating situation with the HOA. "That does not surprise me one bit," Bill said, shaking his head. Karen tried the same strong-arm tactics with my father, but Pop was a founding member of the original community association before Karen transformed it into her personal kingdom. She could never quite get her hooks into our place, which drove her crazy. I should have warned you she would try to assert control once we sold. "The drone flights are becoming daily occurrences," I told him. "It is affecting my animals, especially Ferdinand." Bill leaned closer. "You should talk to the Garcias over on Ridge Road. They had similar problems last year. Word is Karen has been building violation portfolios on properties she wants to control. Documents everything for months, then presents it all at once with maximum daily fines that can run into thousands per month. Forces people to either pay up or sell out." That revelation sat heavily with me as I drove home. The constant surveillance was not just petty harassment. It was strategic, methodical, a calculated effort to either force my compliance or make my dream property financially untenable. I attempted one last official channel, submitting a formal request for an emergency meeting with the full HOA board to address the drone issue. 3 days later, a brief email informed me that my request had been denied without explanation. The same day, I received 7 new violation notices in my mailbox, including one claiming that Ferdinand himself was an aesthetic violation, as he could be partially viewed from the county road. That evening, I found Ferdinand lying in his favorite corner of the pasture, his food untouched for the 3rd consecutive day. His breathing seemed labored, his eyes dull. Concerned, I called Dr. Martinez, the local veterinarian who specialized in large animals. She arrived the next morning, performing a thorough examination of the increasingly listless bull. After checking his vital signs, examining his eyes, and listening to his digestive system, she stepped back with a concerned expression. "Physically, there is nothing significantly wrong with him that I can detect," Dr. Martinez explained. "But he is showing all the classic signs of stress-induced digestive issues. Has there been any change in his environment? Any new stressors?" As if on cue, the drone appeared overhead, descending rapidly to observe our interaction. Ferdinand immediately tensed, his eyes rolling to track the mechanical intruder. "That," I said, pointing upward. "The HOA president flies it over multiple times daily, often hovering directly above Ferdinand." Dr. Martinez frowned, watching Ferdinand's reaction to the aircraft. Animals, especially bulls, are highly territorial and sensitive to threats from above. Predators historically attack from above, so they are genetically programmed to find overhead movement stressful. This constant harassment could absolutely cause the symptoms we are seeing. She prescribed a digestive supplement and recommended moving Ferdinand to a more sheltered pasture, but her parting words stayed with me. "This is not a long-term solution. If the stress continues, his condition will deteriorate. I have seen 2 similar cases in the past month, both from properties within your HOA boundaries." As Dr. Martinez drove away, the drone continued its hover pattern directly above Ferdinand. I watched my proud, beautiful bull cowering beneath the mechanical tormentor, and something inside me finally snapped. The realization crystallized with perfect clarity. Karen Mitchell was not just harassing me. She was harming my animals. She was threatening not just my property rights but the health and well-being of creatures under my care. I had tried compliance. I had attempted dialogue. I had sought official remedies. All had failed. As the drone finally departed and Ferdinand retreated to the far corner of his pasture, I made a decision. The time for polite compliance had ended. If the system would not protect us, I would find another way. The county law library became my second home. Every day after completing essential ranch chores, I drove 30 miles to immerse myself in legal research. The librarian, a retired attorney named Margaret, quickly grew accustomed to my daily visits and began suggesting relevant resources as my focus narrowed. "Agricultural protection statutes," she said one morning, placing a heavy volume on my table. "Many people do not realize that most states have specific laws protecting legitimate agricultural operations from unreasonable interference." I spent hours poring over dense legal text, taking copious notes in a growing collection of notebooks. My research expanded from property rights to privacy laws, FAA drone regulations to local ordinances governing rural land use. Each evening I returned to the ranch, my mind full of legal concepts and potential strategies. The breakthrough came during my 3rd week of research. Buried in a subsection of state agricultural protections was exactly what I needed: a statute specifically protecting farm animals from harassment, including by mechanical devices. The law had been enacted after a dispute between a factory farm and environmental activists who had used drones to monitor operations, causing stress to livestock. The following day, I scheduled a consultation with attorney James Wilson, who specialized in rural property disputes. His office, located above the feed store in the next town over, was cluttered with agricultural implements and legal books in equal measure. A framed diploma from a prestigious law school hung slightly askew beside photographs of Wilson judging county fair livestock competitions. "Based on what you have described," Wilson said after listening to my situation, "you have multiple valid legal complaints. The HOA bylaws are binding contracts, but they cannot supersede state law. The drone flights constitute violations of both FAA regulations regarding recreational drone use and our state's privacy statutes." He leaned forward, tapping a section of the agricultural protection law I had discovered. "This is your strongest position. The documented health effects on your bull, confirmed by a veterinarian, provide clear evidence of harm under this statute." Wilson outlined a comprehensive legal strategy, beginning with formal documentation of all drone activities and their effects. "Courts appreciate meticulous records," he advised. "Document everything: times, durations, altitudes, animal reactions. Install security cameras if possible." Armed with legal knowledge and professional advice, I returned to the ranch with renewed purpose. I implemented Wilson's recommendations methodically. First came proper signage. I installed clearly visible, no trespassing markers at all property boundaries, along with specially ordered agricultural property, protected by state law signs that reference the specific statute numbers. Next, I positioned security cameras at strategic locations, ensuring they captured both my property and the airspace above it. Each camera was configured to store footage securely in cloud storage, creating an undeniable record of the drone intrusions. I maintained detailed logs of Ferdinand's health, including regular weight measurements and behavior observations. Dr. Martinez provided formal veterinary reports documenting the stress-induced symptoms and their probable cause, adding professional medical credibility to my case. Most importantly, I documented every drone appearance with military precision: time of arrival, duration of flight, altitude estimates, flight patterns, specific behaviors of the aircraft that appeared designed to agitate my animals. Each incident was recorded in a dedicated logbook, with corresponding video evidence from the security cameras. As the documentation accumulated, I began noticing patterns in Karen's surveillance routine. The drone flights followed predictable schedules: every morning between 7 and 8, midday between 11 and 1. The most intrusive flight always occurred between 5:30 and 6 in the evening, when Karen would direct the drone to hover at its lowest altitude directly above Ferdinand's favorite eastern pasture. This predictability was a tactical error on Karen's part. Predictable behavior can be anticipated. Anticipated behavior can be prepared for. A plan began forming, its components fitting together with satisfying precision. The final element fell into place when I checked the extended weather forecast. 3 days of clear skies and light winds were predicted, providing perfect flying conditions for Karen's drone and ideal circumstances for what I had in mind. That evening, I sat on my porch reviewing my preparation. The certified cease and desist letter had been delivered to Karen's address that morning, formally demanding an end to the drone flights over my property and citing all relevant laws being violated. My security cameras were positioned and tested. My documentation was comprehensive and legally sound. Most importantly, Ferdinand was rested and ready. After weeks of stress, he had been temporarily relocated to a sheltered paddock where the drone could not easily observe him. His strength was returning. His natural territorial instinct remained intact. Tomorrow would be the day. The legal groundwork was laid. The documentation was in place. The trap was set. All that remained was for Karen to make her usual predictable appearance in the eastern sky, and justice would finally have its chance. The morning dawned clear and calm, exactly as forecasted. I completed my chores with careful attention, ensuring all animals were properly fed and cared for. Today would disrupt the normal routine, and I wanted everything in perfect order before the confrontation. The certified letter containing the formal cease and desist notice had been delivered to Karen's address the previous day. The delivery confirmation showed her signature, proving she had received the legal document prohibiting further drone flights over my property. The notice clearly outlined all relevant laws being violated and the potential consequences of continued trespassing. I harbored no illusions that the letter would deter her. 3 weeks of meticulous documentation had revealed Karen's psychological pattern. Legal warnings would not stop her. They would provoke her. The formal challenge to her authority would likely trigger an even more aggressive response, which was precisely what my strategy required. At 5:15 in the afternoon, I led Ferdinand from his sheltered paddock to the east pasture. His favorite grazing area happened to be the exact location where Karen's drone typically hovered during its evening surveillance route. After weeks of stress and confinement, the bull moved with renewed energy, clearly happy to return to his preferred pasture with its lush grass and open space. I positioned myself near the center of the field, video camera in hand, my cell phone in my pocket with the sheriff's number pre-dialed. The security cameras were already recording from multiple angles, but I wanted direct footage as well, with my narration establishing the context of whatever was about to unfold. At precisely 5:30, right on schedule, the familiar buzzing sound approached from the east. I started recording, speaking clearly for the record. Today is Thursday, May 14th. The time is 5:30 p.m. I am standing in the east pasture of my property with my bull Ferdinand. Despite receiving a legal cease and desist letter delivered yesterday, which is documented in my records, it appears that Karen Mitchell is once again flying her drone over my property. The drone appeared above the tree line, following its usual route across my property. It paused briefly over my barn before continuing toward the pasture where Ferdinand and I waited. I continued my narration, establishing every relevant detail for the record. The drone is now approaching the east pasture, where it typically hovers at low altitude. This behavior has been documented as causing significant stress to my livestock, particularly my bull Ferdinand, whose health has suffered as confirmed by veterinary reports. The property is clearly marked with no trespassing signs and notices of agricultural property protection under state statute 47.1823. Ferdinand noticed the drone immediately. His ears flicked forward, his massive head rising to track the approaching aircraft. But unlike previous encounters where he had shown fear, today he stood his ground, pawing at the earth beneath his hooves. Weeks of harassment had transformed his initial fear into something more primal, more territorial. The change in his posture was unmistakable. The drone descended to its usual harassment altitude, approximately 20 feet above us. Close enough that the downward-facing camera was clearly visible, its lens adjusting as it focused on Ferdinand. The aircraft performed its typical hovering pattern, moving in small circles directly above the bull. Ferdinand's agitation grew visibly. He snorted, tossing his head. 2,000 pounds of muscle tensed beneath his dark hide. I maintained my position and continued recording, careful to capture both the drone's provocative behavior and Ferdinand's mounting response. Then Karen made a critical miscalculation. Perhaps frustrated by Ferdinand's defiant posture rather than his usual retreat, she dropped the drone even lower, descending to barely 15 feet above the bull for a closer view. It was the final provocation. Ferdinand's patience ended in an explosive burst of territorial defense. His powerful legs launched his massive body skyward with astonishing speed and height. For a suspended moment, bull and drone occupied the same airspace. Then came the satisfying crunch of plastic and electronics as Ferdinand's horns connected solidly with the aircraft. The drone shattered spectacularly, components raining down across the pasture grass. The main body of the aircraft landed several yards away, its rotors still twitching uselessly, its camera lens cracked beyond repair. Ferdinand landed with surprising grace, then proceeded to ensure the drone's destruction was complete by trampling the largest remaining piece under his hooves. I continued filming, documenting the entire incident. The drone descended to an aggressive and provocative height above my bull, causing him to defend himself against what he perceived as a threat. The destruction of the drone was a natural consequence of its illegal presence in this agricultural protected space. Exactly 12 minutes later, a silver SUV screeched to a halt at my property line. Karen Mitchell emerged, her face contorted with rage as she stormed toward the fence separating our properties. I approached calmly, video still recording, cell phone ready if needed. "Your animal destroyed my property," she shouted, pointing at Ferdinand, who now grazed peacefully several yards away, the drone forgotten. "That drone cost $3,000. You will pay for replacement immediately or face legal action." I remained silent, allowing her tirade to continue uninterrupted. Her words provided exactly the evidence I had hoped for. "I have every right to monitor compliance on your property. That drone was performing official HOA business when your dangerous animal attacked it." Each sentence she uttered strengthened my legal position, confirming her willful trespassing despite formal notice, her unauthorized surveillance without consent, and her intentional harassment of protected farm animals, all while standing directly beside the clearly posted legal warnings she had chosen to ignore. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke just 2 sentences. "All of this has been documented. You might want to consult an attorney." The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. News of the confrontation had spread rapidly through the community, and the typically sparse attendance was replaced by a standing room-only crowd that spilled out into the hallway of the community center. Many residents I had never met nodded in greeting as I entered, a few offering encouraging smiles. Karen sat rigidly at the board table, her posture perfect as always, showing no outward sign that her authority was being questioned. The other board members appeared uncomfortable, exchanging furtive glances as the room filled to capacity. "This emergency meeting will come to order," Karen announced, her voice carrying the same confident authority it always had. "We are here to address an incident involving destruction of association property and to determine appropriate penalties." The board member with kind eyes, whose name I had learned was Thomas, cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I believe we should clarify that this meeting was called to address concerns about drone usage for compliance monitoring and the broader issue of enforcement methods. The incident is just one aspect of what we need to discuss." Karen's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Thomas, we will cover all relevant aspects." When my turn to speak arrived, I approached the podium calmly, connecting my laptop to the projector system. The room fell silent as I began my methodically organized presentation. "Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board and my neighbors. What I am about to present documents a pattern of harassment that violates state law, federal aviation regulations, and basic property rights." For the next 20 minutes, I displayed the evidence I had gathered. Time-stamped videos showed daily drone intrusions dating back weeks. Dr. Martinez had provided veterinary reports documenting Ferdinand's stress-induced illness and her professional assessment of its cause. I included copies of FAA drone regulations being violated and the agricultural protection statutes specifically prohibiting the harassment of livestock by mechanical devices. The room stirred with murmurs as I revealed the delivery confirmation of the ignored cease and desist letter. When I played the video of Ferdinand's defensive action against the drone, followed by Karen's inadvertent confessions at my fence line, the murmurs grew louder. I concluded with a simple statement. This is not about a broken drone. This is about the systematic abuse of authority and the harassment of both residents and animals in our community. As I returned to my seat, something unexpected happened. An elderly woman in the third row slowly stood. "I would like to speak," she said, her voice quavering slightly. "The same drone has been hovering over my garden for months. I have asked repeatedly for it to stop, as my husband's PTSD from Vietnam is triggered by the sound. Our requests have been ignored." Her testimony opened the floodgates. One by one, neighbors stood to share similar experiences. Drone monitoring during family barbecues, surveillance of children's birthday parties, documentation of minor, technical violations used to justify increasing fines. A pattern emerged from their collective testimony. Karen had been using the drone not as a legitimate enforcement tool, but as an instrument of control and intimidation. The board members exchanged increasingly troubled glances as the testimonies continued. After lengthy deliberation in a closed session, the board returned with their decision. Thomas, not Karen, stood to announce it. Effective immediately, the board is implementing several policy changes. First, a moratorium on drone usage for rural enforcement. Second, recognition of agricultural exemptions for appropriate properties within our boundaries. Third, the formation of a special committee to review and simplify HOA regulations. He paused before continuing. Additionally, the board has requested the resignation of Karen Mitchell as president, which she has provided. Karen sat stone-faced throughout the announcement, her expression revealing nothing as her 15-year reign ended with a stroke of bureaucratic procedure. The following Sunday evening found me standing beside Ferdinand in his pasture, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant orange and pink. The bull had recovered quickly once the drone harassment ended, his appetite returning, his coat regaining its healthy shine. A truck pulled up to my fence line. It was my neighbor Bill Henderson, whose family had sold me the property. He approached with a basket covered by a checkered cloth. "Fresh bread from my wife," he said, handing it over the fence, "and an invitation to a genuine community gathering next weekend. Not an HOA meeting, just neighbors enjoying each other's company." As Bill drove away, I glanced toward the barn where I had mounted the recovered drone parts like a trophy. The broken device served as a reminder that sometimes justice requires allowing a bull to handle what humans cannot. Ferdinand, unaware of his role in community politics, continued peacefully grazing in the golden evening light, once again master of his domain.